when you start within and do the work on yourself, you naturally have more compassion, understanding, and look at other people and go, well, you behave that way because of your conditioning, your programming. So you can
Welcome to another episode of the True Life Network podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ashabi, and today I got a special treat for you guys. Today's guest is an expert in self-empowerment. She's the founder and creative director of the Inspiring Minds movement. Having to overcome extreme adversities in her own life and develop such strength and independence from a young age, she is a true example of a constructive self-improvement powerhouse. Ladies and gentlemen, today I bring to you the one and only inspirational speaker and self-empowerment coach, Jessica Kate. Jessica, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great intro.
So Jessica, the first thing I want to kind of pick your brain on is what, caused you to create this movement?
Yeah, great question, and one that I've answered many, many times. Look, it started from my own journey. Obviously, everyone has a story, and I can go right back into the beginning of it all. But so I grew up in a home of domestic violence and drug abuse, and left home at the age of 17. The first place I moved into was my friend's car garage. My bed was literally set up next to a washing machine, and I always tell people that was my head start in life, right? Because I feel that it taught me so much, and it made me really hungry to want to build a life for myself that I was proud of and become someone that I was really proud of and happy with. And from there, I did develop, a great mindset, so I thought, and built a life that looked perfect from the outside in. And, an Instagram worthy life, people would say. And unfortunately, I felt like I was dying on the inside. There was something missing, and I wasn't personally fulfilled, and I wasn't truly connected to who I was at the time. And there were so many questions unanswered. Who am I? What's the purpose of my life? All of those things. And then it took my father's passing. I lost him to suicide nearly 4 years ago now. And that was the catalyst for me to really have that awakening and that pivotal moment in my life where I was willing to go deep and discover the answers to those questions I was asking myself for some time. And it's just been this incredible journey of self-discovery and a rebirth, which you and I have talked about. And it's a beautiful thing. And so I'm on this journey now to awaken people and restore them to their natural state of being more human-like than desensitized and unconscious.
100%. Now, you said that there were certain questions that you were asking yourself that you were in deep search for. What were those questions?
Who am I? What's the purpose of my life? What am I doing here? What are we all doing here? Right? What is the purpose of all of this? You get up every day and go to your 9-to-5 job, and you go home and watch mindless TV and go to bed and wake up and do it all over again. And every day felt like Groundhog Day. And it wasn't until I embarked on my entrepreneurial journey, left my full-time job, and grew my first business to 6 figures in a short time of 2 years, I thought, is this what it's meant to be? Am I meant to sink my teeth into something I'm really passionate about and serve people through my business? And that gave me some purpose. But as I said, there was still so much from my past and my childhood that I hadn't really opened up Pandora's box and gone into that and explored what had created my programming, why I thought the way that I did, and my behavioral traits and things. And so becoming emotionally fit or emotionally intelligent was high on my priority list at that time. And it's just been something else ever since I embarked on that journey, I tell you what.
So you just brought up emotional intelligence, and how do you think that plays a part in your productivity on a daily basis? I'm just curious, just on your side, how does that play a role in your daily activities, but not only your daily activities, but what you're trying to fulfill here?
Yeah, well, look, as a success mindset coach, and I know success looks different to everyone, I think that's a really, really important question because I feel a lot of my teachings and my coaching all comes from a heart-centered place, right? I really get people to come back to focus on themselves, not the external. And with the external, it's their job, it's their career, it's their passion, their sports, their relationships, everything, but they're disconnected from who they are and what's truly on their heart. And it's our programming and previous experiences that we've been through that have created this set of beliefs and these stories we tell ourselves that detach us from that, right? So, my whole craft or my zone of genius, I believe, is, as I said, restoring people back to their natural state, getting them to come back to their heart and really listen to what it is that they want for themselves, regardless of what society says or what Instagram tells them they should have in their life. I think it's really important that we tune into ourselves and acknowledge who we are. And through that, you set a set of boundaries and this self integrity and respect of, well, if I value time, I'm not going to waste it doing XYZ. If I value myself, I'm not going to lower my standards to be around people that do XYZ, if you know what I mean. So with that comes this next level of self-respect and integrity, as I said, but it's this level of consciousness that you weren't privy to before, right? And so you get really used to spending time on your own as well, right? You learn to love your own company because you know who you are now, right? I think we get so distracted with all the external and we don't know how to tune into ourselves because nobody teaches you this at school and we're not raised that way through society and our communities. That it really is a self exploration of, well, if no one's going to teach me this, I have to be willing to dig into this myself, and no one else can get inside my head and think what I'm thinking and create the emotions I create. So if you're not willing to learn and discover that and take control of that, then you can't take control of your destiny and the quality of your life.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, I
Yeah.
always tell everybody it comes down to that internal game, right? I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are allowing that external factor to really influence what's going on internally, when in reality, if you could truly understand what's going on internally and master that game, you're able to influence and manifest what you want externally, right? But
Yes.
there's a term that you just used just a few moments ago, and you were talking about programming. Can you touch upon
Mm.
that idea of programming and your perspective on that whole societal programming?
Yeah, definitely. So as I was saying, when we're younger, usually between the ages of 5 and 7, that they're the very primal years of when we experience, if it's any type of trauma, abandonment, rejection, hurt, pain, suffering, anything like that, we tend to create stories around those experiences. And you know how imaginative children can be, right? Like we
100%.
believed in superheroes and Santa Claus and all the rest of it. We probably thought we could, grow wings and fly at some stage. Some people have really tried to do that and jumped off roofs and things. So, if we have such a wild imagination as children, imagine the stories that we've created around those experiences that have developed into our reality. And then we create beliefs associated with those stories. And these beliefs may be debilitating our growth and preventing us from moving forward in our journey. And they can become so detrimental to how we shape ourselves as a human being and how we show up to the world every day.
Well,
And that's what I'd like to help people acknowledge. What is their programming? What are these stories? Like, let's connect the dots,
well,
right? There's a story, there's a belief, and then they behave from those beliefs.
Well, what an interesting portion of this whole concept of programming is that, just as you're saying that we're creating those narratives ourselves, right? But are we really creating those narratives ourselves? I think that ultimately it's influenced through that external environment, right? Through our
Yes.
parents, our friends, what society thinks, or what school thinks that we're supposed to be, right? So
Yes.
it's not really that internal validation, right? And I think that it takes, and I'm curious your opinion on this. I think it really takes that disengagement, right? Really get out of that
Mhm.
noise to go ahead and figure out, okay, are these actually my own thoughts? Is this actually real to me? Like the story that I'm telling myself? Because I think that that story portion is going to ultimately dictate, because that story is your perception, right? And that's going to
Yes.
dictate how you're feeling about yourself, situation, or circumstance, and ultimately decide how you act. And, depending on how you're acting is going to determine what result you get, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I love where you're going with this.
So,
I love where you're going with this. We're going to go deep on this.
so I'm,
So yeah, 100% agree. And what I would say is from those experiences when we're young, you imagine like how much TV we watch, how much of the media we consume, depending what area you've grown up in as well, mind you, because not everyone had TV or had social media. And I think I'm so fortunate to grow up in a time where I didn't have social media when I was young. I was out, playing in the mud and building cubby houses and stuff with my friends and my neighbors. And that to me is a childhood that a lot of children are not privileged to have now. And it is the social media and all these technology devices that we have now that are desensitizing and programming humans like robots. And it's really scary to witness, really scary to witness.
are you down to get a little controversial here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So, at the end of the day, I mean, this is just my perspective on the whole situation with TV, social media, and or, even music. I think music is the major component here. We had
Music,
a little
yeah.
bit of a conversation yesterday, and I was kind of telling you a little bit about my insight on how it's actually conditioning society to think in a certain perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, in your opinion, how do you feel that, this programming that's conditioned through, social media, TV
Cool.
and music is
Mm-hmm.
really influencing our youth, and where do you think it's going to take us in the future?
Ooh. Well, the times are changing dramatically. Like, as I said, from when I was growing up to think what it is now. I'm 39 now, and I'm witnessing so many people in their early 30s, just this whole different genre of people that are coming through that have experienced a different upbringing. And I really feel that that's why my teachings are so valuable and why I have been so successful in this space as a coach, is because I am from a time where I wasn't programmed through those external sources from a young age. I wasn't exposed to that. And so I feel that that is why I still carry my teachings through a heart-centered place of coming back to that, because these people that have grown up with that different reality, right? They don't understand, and that they are desensitized from what the other possibilities could be for their reality right now. So I love sharing that space with them and taking them on that journey and exploring what could be possible for them. As for the future, to answer your question, I have no idea where we're going with all of this.
I'm
It's quite
concerned.
scary to
Uh,
even think about.
I'm telling you, I'm concerned for the future of our generations to come. You know what I mean? And the reason why I'm actually bringing this up in conversation right now is because here's my perspective on it. I feel that technology has caused us to become weak as a society, right? At the end of the day,
Mhm.
like we said, that we're being programmed through all the content that we're consuming, whether it's on our phone, our computer, TV, music that we're listening, right? And I think
Yeah.
that at the end of the day, what's really going on is we're being controlled, and we don't even know that we're not in control because it's normal. Everybody's listening, everybody's consuming the same exact content, right? So, in my perspective, what's really going on is, since we're being controlled, we're meant to rely on the system, right?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that most people don't know how to break out of the system, or if you want to call it the quote unquote matrix. Um, they don't know how to break through that and really become a free thinker and independent as an individual, as a human, right? And I think that it really takes, this is my experience. It really takes that pain for it to click and realize what's really going on in reality. For you, I know that based off of our conversation, we were talking about the whole situation with your dad. What was that thing
Mm.
that triggered you to realize what's going on in reality?
Yeah, look, it was a huge awakening for me in the process of we can be here 1 minute and gone the next. And if I had these questions of what's the purpose and meaning of my life, why am I settling to be a slave to the system? I mean, I already had my own business then, so I wasn't a slave to the system in that regard, but I was in the sense of believing that accumulating material possessions and trying to have personal fulfillment in such a materialistic world, it baffled me as to even the people I associated with, everything. It was just like, I felt like I woke up and no one else was. Everyone else was asleep. And that was really frustrating in that process. You know, I was married, I had this big, beautiful home, and we had overseas trips every year and drove my luxury car and all these things. And it was just like, from the outside in, as I said, it was the perfect life for most people. And they thought I was absolutely crazy walking away from it all. But at that point, I was so conscious and aware of how programmed or conditioned I'd become to society's way of living, that I was willing to like buy a combi van and just go travel around and be a hipster, because it was the complete opposite to what I had designed my life to be and what I feel society had conditioned and programmed me to believe was the answer to happiness.
So do you think that what society was telling you to perceive as happiness, whether it's material and or certain behaviors and acts in, you know, our environments, do you think that, you know, how do you think that influenced your happiness and fulfillment? Because, like, you know, at the end of the day, I think that ultimately what's going on with people is they think they know what's going to bring them fulfillment, but in reality, when you think you know something and you get there, what happens? Nine out of 10 times you get there and you're just like, this is not what I expected it to be, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, you always want more. You're always looking for the next thing. You want that next dopamine hit. You want that next high. And you don't feel fulfilled unless you've got that next thing in your sights that you're striving towards. And that's what gives you purpose and makes you wake up every day, is to chase that next thing. And I just noticed that it was like this never-ending cycle. And what I had unpacked through my own journey once my father passed was, I didn't even know at the time, because I wasn't conscious, that I was living in a fear-based state of survival. Since I'd left home at such a young age and had to fend for myself, I had developed this tough sort of ball-busting babe, bloody entrepreneur, powerhouse woman that was actually coming from the energy source from that was actually from an unhealthy place of survival. Right? It wasn't from passion, purpose-driven success. It was survival. And that's why I love, in the space that I'm in now, being a success mindset coach, is, as I said, restore them back to their most humanness version of themselves that I can, get them to reconnect to themselves. And then once they discover what's truly on their heart, they can create purpose-driven success and something that they're passionate about, rather than what they've been programmed or conditioned to believe they need to achieve in order to be happy. And in that as well, I also discovered that I had created that identity in that survival state of what I thought I needed in order to survive.
So do you think, in your opinion though, do you think that it's safe to say that, you know, at the end of the day, happiness comes from fulfillment, right? Now, do you think it's safe to say that consciousness is the actual route to fulfillment?
So yeah, I think the whole process of really acknowledging ourselves and our thoughts and our behaviors and where they come from, and learning who we are as an individual, what uniquely makes us who we are, is the answer to finding that purpose-driven success and removing all the masks and the identities that we create in order to survive, which most people in the world are doing. They're creating these identities and these personas of, I need this in order to survive in society's conditions and way of living today.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what being asleep is all about, right? We need to fulfill a certain role in society's standards rather than our own standards. And I think that shifting that external validation to internal validation is ultimately what's going to wake you up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So confidence and clarity is the two main reasons people come to me, because they lack both of them.
So,
right?
so what do you see as the reoccurring theme when you're focusing with your clients on clarity and confidence? What do you see the reoccurring theme to be? Why they lack it?
yeah, the reoccurring theme there is that they're incongruent. So there's a bridge there, like there's a gap that we need to fill, because they're acting one way and dreaming another, and they're not congruent with who they really want to be, and there's conflict between the two identities, the external image of who they've created in order to feel loved, to feel worthy, to survive, and all of those things, right? And then there's the internal reality of who they really are, and the one that is being suppressed or silenced through their conditioning.
So you're saying that ultimately people are suppressing, themselves, and I think this is why the consciousness part is, the biggest portion, because if you're not conscious, that means you're unaware of thyself,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I
Yep.
think that ultimately when you're going through painful situations, this is why, in my opinion, it wakes you up, because at the end of the day, you get so fed up with either the circumstance, the situation, or even just your day-to-day habits, right? Where it just wakes, just like Tony Robbins says, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, because your emotional state, your body takes on that emotional state where it's just fed up and exhausted, where it's almost forced to wake up, right? And see a different perspective. And ultimately your perception will dictate how you feel. How you feel will dictate how you act, and how you act will determine your results. So it really takes that bodily emotional state to wake up consciously and change your perspective to get a different result.
100%, yeah. But I believe people need to want to change.
Well, yeah, that's where it comes down to, in my opinion. Once again, this is all opinion. At the end of the day, what's real for us doesn't mean it's necessarily real for somebody else, right?
Exactly.
In my opinion, it's not even want, like, I don't even think it's the want, it's the necessity behind having to change. When you're just so fed up and sick and tired of your own, excuse my language, bullshit. Right? When you're getting the same result, because at the end of the day, when you're doing the same exact thing and hoping you get a different result, it's the definition of insanity. So I think that it takes that individual to get to that point of insanity, to wake up and realize, all right, we got to change something up.
Yeah, they need an anchor pain point of, well, I don't want to live like this anymore. So what's the options for me to get on the other side of that? And that's when it gets to the point where people reach out to me for help. They're sitting in the pain of that unworthiness, the confusion, the frustration. What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Having that lack of personal fulfillment. And when they sit in that pain and they know that they want to change, and they've got this hunger and desire to be better and do better, that's when they reach out. And I love that. I love that they've even taken the courage to, found the courage to want to put their hand up, because a lot of people are unself-aware, as you were saying before. And that's where the lack of confidence comes in as well, is because they're not self-aware. And that's why I mentioned earlier about when you are conscious and you have that self-awareness, you are willing to set boundaries and have standards for yourself. But unconscious people don't do that. They tolerate so much crap, and they allow themselves to be mistreated, and they abandon themselves in that survival state of, well, if I stay in this situation, maybe I'll be loved, maybe I'll be seen, maybe I'll be heard, maybe I'll find purpose here. And that could be through work, relationships, anything.
Do you think that it just comes down to a sense of acceptance?
Yeah, but they can't accept things if they don't have awareness, right? So that's what I mean by making them consciously aware first, and then allowing them to choose to have acceptance. But a big one is forgiveness. Like, so many people are sitting in pain and suffering because they don't forgive their parents, they don't forgive their ex-partner, all of these things that are external to them. And a lot of coaches expect their students to focus on those external things and find forgiveness for other people. And my biggest thing in my teachings is, you cannot have awareness of someone else's behavior or compassion and understanding for someone else's emotional projection onto you, unless you're willing to have that for yourself first. And so regardless of whose you believe has caused you pain and suffering, you have to be willing to accept that you are responsible for the internal battle that you and the suffering that you have created within yourself. And when people tap into that and they cry and have forgiveness and compassion for their own way of being, then they're able to start having that for others more naturally. And that's how you create inner peace.
100%. I actually think that that's honestly the key to it all, because, at the end of the day, you can't win the war against the world unless you win the war against your mind, right? And I think that, at the end of the day, the biggest battle that each individual is having with the world is who's more conscious, right? And I really think that what people really have to start doing is evaluating, themselves rather than evaluating their perception of what they think people are going to think of them. I think people are afraid and they don't take action because they're worried about what other people think. And there's actually, this is something that Jay Shetty talks about. It's a quote from a philosopher named Cooley, and he says, "I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am." So ultimately, we live in a perception of ourselves. And I think that most people are staying reliant on the system because society has conditioned us to perceive ourselves based off of what we think people are thinking of us. And I think that the hardest part is really taking that step to step away from the noise, right? Because, and I think it actually has something to do with being introverted too. I think that introverts have an upper hand to this. And if you really look at the dynamic with successful individuals, whether it's billionaires or high performance individuals, there's two common traits. One, they are actually introverted. People don't know that. And the reason why that's actually a huge component is because rather than engulfing themselves in that noise, they're sitting back and they're observing so they know how to maneuver, right? The second portion is a low IQ. Most people think that the higher the IQ, the more chances that individual will be successful. Completely false. The higher the IQ, the less likely that individual is going to be successful, because at the end of the day, they're actually thinking about the actions on what will actually get them a result. And since they're thinking about it, that analytical part of their brain is causing them to hesitate and be risk adverse, rather than just taking action and learning through experience and then readjusting through that knowledge that they obtained from the experience. So, I think that, ultimately what it comes down to is disengage. People are afraid to not be accepted. And the reason why they're not fully fulfilled is because they're so worried about being accepted and what other people think about. But it's actually, just like you said, self-inflicted. It's your own perception of what you think people are going to think. And because of what you're thinking, it's actually bringing that to fruition, right?
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, in your opinion, have you ever had to disengage from, your current circle, certain people? What has that done for you?
Well, I just want to continue with what you said there about people that have confidence and certainty in who they are a huge threat to people that aren't, right? I remember saying to you yesterday, I've pissed a lot of people off in this industry because of the confidence and certainty in who I am, and that I don't care how I'm perceived or how they filter me through their own reality, right? I'm so conscious that I know that that is their perception, their reality, and I'm not responsible for how they filter me through the lens of their own perception, their own reality. So when you learn to master that and you're 100% confident and aware of yourself, and you've got those standards and those boundaries and that self-respect and the self-awareness that we've been talking about, there's no stopping you. And that's what I like helping people tap into.
And what's crazy about the whole portion of this conversation is that is a false identity that is self-induced, right? And if you really look at it, because it's, a false identity that's self-induced, we're operating based off of fear. What's fear? False evidence appearing real.
Yes.
Right? So we create, and since we're consistently thinking that this is the actual scenario, what's going on, now we're actually, making that permanent, because the more consistent that you think about it, repetition makes permanence. It's actually becoming our reality, right? We're bringing it to fruition. And I think that what it really takes, once again, I'm not even joking, when I hit my low point, I disengaged for a full year, didn't talk to really my friends, my family that much. I just really sat by myself to think about those simple questions that you said. Who am I? What is my purpose? Why are we here? Simple questions, yet hard to answer. Just because it's simple doesn't mean that it's easy, right? And I think that the biggest component of society, at the end of the day, comes down to you create your own environment, and it all starts internally.
Yes. Yeah. I've spoken from stage and all my social media platforms about this core message of the only person you're at war with is yourself.
Your only limit is you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I remind people, while you are becoming self-aware, be gentle with yourself, because you're meeting parts of yourself you've been at war with. And this is part of the process of silencing the ego and removing the masks of those identities that you created in order to survive, to feel worthy. And in that, we've abandoned ourselves. And that's where that forgiveness comes in, right? Because if you've abandoned yourself and allowed yourself to be mistreated, or put yourself in a situation that you've tolerated and, not valued your worth, you can't be angry at the person that mistreated you, because you're the one that allowed it to happen to yourself. And when you start within and do the work on yourself, you naturally have more compassion, understanding, and look at other people and go, well, you behave that way because of your conditioning, your programming. So you can just live in this place of peace and happiness within, knowing who you are, and stand in your truth and your power with such confidence and certainty.
So there's a concept that you just brought up right there. Start living within, right? But I think that, maybe you could walk us through the steps of what you did to start living within, right? Because I think that most people, it's easy to say it. It's a hard concept to actually grasp and implement into your life because of, once again, our conditioning. So what are steps that you've personally taken to allow yourself to live within rather than externally?
Well, it's very confronting and rewarding and liberating all at the same time. I tell people, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's confronting, it's uncomfortable. You may kick and scream through the process, but it's absolutely necessary. And as you meet these parts of yourself, your ego is going to come in and try and protect you and say, well, no, I didn't do that. And no, that's not my fault. Right. So it's a process. It's peeling back those layers. As I said, you may kick and scream through it. You may be really angry and frustrated with yourself, but I've gone down many different routes with my own journey of healing and confronting those parts of myself. I'm a huge believer in journaling for a start. So journaling and having these solo conversations with yourself, not expecting a therapist or a coach or someone else to really extract all that out of you. You owe it to yourself to sit down and have those solo conversations and hold space for yourself. There's so much power in doing that, right? You're really honoring who you are as a person when you're willing to do that. And we always are sort of programmed to be like, hey, go call your mom or call your best friend or have a beer with your mate and sit down and talk about those things because we crave connection. But what if you could learn to find that fulfillment in that form of connection with yourself? What if you actually really liked who you are? What if you actually enjoyed your own thoughts and you could have these solo conversations with yourself, right? So that was something I was willing to explore, and that was really powerful. I've also done some energy healing as well to sort of extract some of those traumas, because I feel that like my body healing became my subconscious.
Are you talking about like chakra healing?
No, well, some of it was in person, some of it was over Zoom, but it was more a process where, just in brief, they sort of get you to source and locate the pain in your body where you're feeling it. And then they get you to give it a color and a consistency and all these sorts of things, so that you're actually locating that pain and then finding out where's the source of, like, what's the cause of that pain? Where is it actually coming from? And it could be anger that you're storing in the body. It could be sadness. It could be anything. Everyone's different. But through all my studies with Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about our body becoming our subconscious. And he explained that every time we produce a thought, a chemical is released from our brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I try and rephrase this or use a metaphor with my clients. I always tell them, imagine like a tap dripping. And every time you produce a thought, that tap is dripping either black, horrible tar liquid poison into your body, or it could be dripping gold and sparkles, right? And so every time you produce a negative thought, I try and get them to imagine that their brain is releasing a chemical that's going down into the body, and it sends a message back up to the brain to check in with the brain and make sure that the body's feeling what it's thinking. And I say to them, that's why you get the goosebumps, you get butterflies in your stomach, you can get a lump in your throat, right? All these things happen because your body's feeling what you're thinking. And so if you produce enough of the negative thoughts and you drip this poison into your body becomes so conditioned and so used to feeling those negative emotions because you've trained it to do so, that your body can take over and become the subconscious. And it can store years and years and years of pain in there, even if you feel that you've forgotten that ex-partner that broke your heart, or the time that your father hit you till you pissed your pants or whatever, right? You can imagine that you've put that out of your mind and you've moved on, but your body doesn't forget if you've trained it to.
I love that you're bringing up, this portion of the body taking on that emotional state, because, at the end of the day, I've done a lot of, lessons from Dr. Joe Dispenza as well. Done a lot of my research on quantum physics, etc., and, the quantum field. But, at the end of the day, this is what's really going on, and this is more scientific terms of what you're saying. But for those people that are watching that do understand this, at the end of the day, what's really going on here is that when you are in certain situations that, are uncomfortable or, make you feel certain emotions, what happens is your body takes on that memory, right? And those memories are actually stored in our neural pathways. So what happens is our reactive mind actually goes ahead and like, let's say, for example, we're in a certain situation that is familiar or similar to a previous experience, we might not even realize, we might not even be at a conscious level to realize that our body's going to overtake that emotional state once again, but it just kicks in because we're in a similar environment from a previous experience. So I love that you brought that up, because I feel like most people don't even talk about it. And I think that, for example, for any men or even women out there that are listening to this, I think that it could be relatable. Let's say, for example, you're at a bar, right? And you see a pretty girl, or, in women's terms, a handsome man, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a woman, so I have to, say, women's terms. But at the end of the day, you see somebody attractive, you approach them, and you have this perception going in thinking that, hey, it's going to work out this way, right? Does not work out the way that you were hoping it was going to work out. You get rejected. Now, every time moving forward that you're actually, approaching somebody that you are somewhat attracted to, guess what? Every time you're in that situation, you're naturally going to take on that emotional state and project that onto that individual, and that's going to cause for that consistent cycle to continuously happen and obtain the same result, right?
Yeah.
I think that most people don't even realize that memories are stored in our neural pathways, and it just comes down to our previous experiences in life.
But what Joe also talks about, Dr. Joe Dispenza, is with the difference between like animals and ourselves, and why it's so difficult being a human sometimes, is that we don't necessarily need our environment to influence these thoughts and feelings. We can create a state of fear and anxiety and all these things through thought alone. Where an animal, for example, like a deer that's being chased by a lion, it physically needs to be chased by a lion to go into a state of fear and want to run for its life. It needs to physically see the lion and go, holy shit, I'm going to be eaten here if I don't run for my life. Whereas we could be sitting there by ourselves, not threatened and not in an environment that creates those feelings, but we could do it through thought alone, just by thinking about a situation and an experience, or trying to predict the future.
But you know why, right?
Alone. Sorry?
You know why, right?
You know why?
Like, I'm asking, do you know why that is, though?
Oh, of course. I'd love to know your thoughts though.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's because, our mind is so powerful, right? We can actually, envision ourselves in that actual experience, and because we can envision it, it starts to become real to us that we feel like we've actually been through that experience, right? So
Mm-hmm.
your
Mm-hmm.
mind can play tricks on you, whether you've experienced it or not. You make that an actual experience. When you actually think about it and you sit in that idea, now you're actually experiencing all the emotions that are actually that come with that specific situation or experience. Now it's real to you. That's why.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And but if you've been doing it for so long, like I said, if that tap's been dripping for so long, it's going to be harder to try and turn that off, right? It's not something that's just happened once a month or once every 6 months. This is something that people live and breathe consistently, and that tap's been dripping for like 60 years of their life for the last, well, I actually coach a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And some of them come to me with this conditioning and programming that they've been living this way with these thoughts and these stories and this tap dripping that I'm talking about for the last 40 years of their life, or, more than that.
Well,
And
I think
it's really scary to think that that's how long they've been conditioning themselves to live in that state.
100%. I think that the older that an individual gets, it's harder to uncondition them because at the end of the day, repetition does make permanence. So the more that they're actually putting themselves in that emotional state, it's gonna obviously dictate their perspective on life.
Mm,
And that's why they always say when you want to help somebody mold into a certain version of themselves, you have to start young. The older they get, the less likely it's actually going to happen because through that repetition and the consistency of them doing a certain behavior or activity is ultimately going to create who they are, right?
yeah,
So,
100%. Yeah. So Joe talks about, as I was saying before, the not needing the environment to influence you, but just through thought alone. And if people can realize that they're responsible for creating those thoughts and they're conditioning their body to do that, they have the power to reverse that. And it is possible. You can teach an old dog new tricks
it's true.
if they've got the persistence and the will to do so.
I think
Um,
that's actually a huge component too. That will comes from that consciousness though, right? And that consciousness comes from that pain because if you really think about it, what is pain? It's something that we feel. If we feel it, it means that we're aware, right?
mhm.
And I think that that's why emotional intelligence is something that's super underrated. I think that
I
people
know.
aren't able to really be in tune about their own emotions. And if they're not in tune with their own emotions, how are they going to be able to be in tune and understand another person and what they're going through, right? And I think that that's why, personal growth and development and our industry in specific is something that is super underrated because people don't want to be in tune with them. They don't want to confront themselves. They don't want to know what's really going on. They're afraid of what they're going to find. But that's honestly the
Mhm.
truth. And once again, the truth will set you free and allow you to live your true life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel that's why people keep looking for answers externally, keep finding things that'll fill the voids within, because that's what they've been programmed to believe is the answer and the solution. So the whole point of our line of work and what we're doing and raising that level of consciousness across humanity and worldwide is to get people to realize that the answers are within. And if you stop being addicted to the external, then you can find that inner peace, that happiness, the joy, all of the positive emotions, because you are responsible for creating them.
I love that you just said that because I always talk about this too. If you look at all my previous podcasts, anytime I'm on stage, I always tell everybody that the answers are within. And,
Mm,
I'm not saying this to put you or I out of business, right? At the end of the day, you need, leaders to kind of, show the route of how to find the answers within. At the end of the day, I think that a lot of people are seeking somebody else to help them find the answers, right? And, that's what I'm saying. Hopefully we don't go out of business because of this comment. At the end of the day, a coach or, a mentor or a guru is not going to give you the answers, right? They might be able to lead you depending on if it's a right individual, they will be able to lead you on how to go within, do that internal work, and find the answers. All the answers are within. Most people
Yes.
just don't know how to maneuver internally to come up with those answers. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah. So I always say my job is to guide them.
exactly. And I think that's the
Mm.
huge component between an actual effective coach and somebody who's just trying to have that label. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish I could put out there that I'm a guide. I'm a guide, not a coach. And people would be like, what the hell's that?
So, in your opinion, do you think that this is something that is irreversible at this point in society? That we can actually get each individual to only seek that internal validation, seek that clarity, internal clarity and confidence, and really go out and live their true life? Because, once again, there's what, 8.4 billion people on the planet?
Yeah.
And I know that impact starts by only impacting one other person, but do you think that at this point in time, it might be a little bit hard to get the whole world to wake up?
Oh, a little bit hard. I think it's impossible, to be honest. I think that there's so many other contributing factors. The fact that there are so many different versions of reality around the world. If you look at the different races, different religions, different cultures, there's so many different versions of reality. And there's no way that we can globally awaken the entire world to come together in unity and believe in the same reality.
Well, do you think that the reason why most people think that is because, at the end of the day, what we're talking about could be a complex idea for an individual, right? And because it's complex, it might not be so simple to understand. I think that it takes one individual to really simplify what we're talking about and effectively communicate it where it's understanding at no matter what level you're at. Like someone can actually understand what you're talking about and it just clicks.
Yes. Yes, I do understand what you're saying, but I also believe there's a lot of people out there that refuse to remove the victim mindset. And that's what I said about wanting to grow, wanting to change, wanting to be an extraordinaire, wanting to develop themselves. There's so many people that they actually value the victim mindset and living in that state of being a victim in their own story more than they value what could be on the other side of that.
Well, you know what my opinion is in regards to how to actually get it done? We need to, first of all, change up the freaking school systems. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
definitely.
It's government controlled, right? And I think that we really need to go in and teach people from adolescence, confidence, effective communication. If they can't effectively, the reason why they can't effectively communicate with another individual is because they can't effectively communicate with themselves, understand themselves. And I think that these are critical, important aspects of what we need to implement for our future generations in order to actually shift the outcome of what our future generations are going to look like.
Absolutely, it's a great place to start. However, I also believe that a lot of people end up at school already severely damaged. Some people are raised in homes where there's severe domestic violence or rape or anything like that. And they've already been programmed and conditioned before they reach school. And even the influence at school cannot override like what is actually happening in their own homes. And some people live the most horrific childhoods that we couldn't even possibly imagine. And it's going to take so much more to remove the trauma and remove that programming from someone who's experienced that, as opposed to let's put them in school and give them a different education. It's so much more deep rooted than that, I believe, for some people.
I mean that makes sense too. I think
Mm.
that it's really just I think that it is possible. I hate the word impossible. I always try to think of different routes of how you can make it possible because if you want something so bad, you're going to do everything in your power to actually make it happen. And, the reason why I even created my company and, the True Life Network podcast is because I want to help people live their true life. And I think that it really comes down to that component of what we're talking about. I think that most people are just afraid to not rely on the system and rely on themselves, which, if you really look at the concept of what I'm talking about, that's where the confidence comes into play. And, because the definition of confidence is a self-assurance and appreciation of one's own abilities and or qualities. So if you're relying on the system, you're not appreciating your own qualities and abilities to go out there and make it happen yourself. And I think that I understand the whole situation with like certain people being raised in certain households where, they were either raped or abused as a child and whatnot. But look, fault and responsibility do not go together, right? It might not be your fault that something like that happened in your adolescence, but at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to figure out how to deal with that pain and still create a happy life for yourself, right?
Of course.
And I understand that those are, traumatic situations, but at the end of the day, I was talking to Evan Carmichael on the phone one day, and he told me this one thing, this one quote that really changed my perspective and outlook on life. He said, "Your ruin is your gift to give back to the world." So what he meant by that was what ruins you and it puts you in an all-time low and you get through it is ultimately your gift to seek out individuals in a similar situation and help them get through it. So somebody, who has grown up in an environment like that can be there for another individual to help them get through it and realize that, hey, you know what? I understand what you've been through, but let's change the world together.
Yeah, I love that. I think what you're saying before about you want everyone to live their true life, that relates back to what we were discussing earlier, though, that your version of your true life would be different to my version or anyone else's. So because there's all these different versions of reality that I was referencing, that means, and you imagine like the different cultures and different religions, like their way of how they're raised when they're young, it's the style of food that they eat, how they eat it, where they sleep, how they sleep, what time of day they're actually allowed to eat and not eat or pray or whatever, right? It's how they're conditioned when they grow up. And I actually had this deep conversation with someone recently about terrorists and how they actually believe that what they're doing is a good thing, right? They are conditioned and programmed to believe that what they're doing is a good thing. And in that conversation, we're talking about whether we believe that they're happy in doing it because they know that if they believe it's a good thing, why are they not happy when they're doing it? And I said, well, I don't believe they're happy when they're doing it because you can see them in their state of rage and anger and the way that they treat people when they're, hijacking a plane or something. That's not happiness. There's no smile on their face. They're not celebrating and cheering in unity of, hey, look what we're doing. They're walking around sweating, their heart's racing. They are beside themselves with what they're doing, but they've been programmed and conditioned that they have to do it. And what they're doing is necessary. And so this is what I mean by how people can be programmed almost like a robot to believe in a reality that seems so obscene to someone else. And this can happen all around the world through different cultures, different religions, different ways of being.
I see where you're coming from. No, I definitely see where you're coming from. I don't know. I'll find a way that it's possible. We'll change the world.
I love it. I love the persistence.
But let me ask you something. If people do want to, follow you and also get more information on, your insights on how to gain clarity and confidence, where can they actually find you?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media platforms. But as I was saying before, my main craft and my zone of genius is restoring people back to their most natural state possible so that they can create a belief system and a mindset to support their dreams and whatever that looks like for them. Everyone's different, and I understand we all live in a different reality, but it's shaping and molding a reality that serves a purpose and creates that inner peace and inner power and drive to want to do more than just exist every day. And so I run group coaching programs, offer one-on-ones. But yeah, I'm available on all the platforms. You'll find me under Jessica Kate or Inspiring Minds Movement or Inspiring Minds Academy, where we run all the programs. it's just raising the vibrations of humanity was the main reason behind me creating the movement in the first place. And then it just led to me being a coach and touring and running events and workshops and retreats and coaching and things. And it's been phenomenal. It's been quite the journey. I didn't expect it to evolve into this, but as I evolved in my journey, so did the movement and so did my vision.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. Jessica, I appreciate you joining us. Definitely go give her a follow, give a thumbs up if you guys like this episode, and hopefully maybe one day we could do this in person.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be there. I'll be there.
I'm looking forward to it. Jessica, I appreciate you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.